New developments in a deadly domestic dispute in Birmingham. Police have just identified the man they say was hit and pinned against a house by the mother of his children.
Bitch, clock it. Bitch, clock that teeth. Bitch, I better start clocking that teeth, bitch.
The smell of barbecue still lingered in the air. Children's laughter echoed from the backyard. Balloons rustled in the spring breeze. It was Easter Sunday in Birmingham, Alabama, and for a few brief hours, the Jackson Bostic household was filled with celebration. It was also their daughter's birthday. She had just turned 7. But beneath the decorations and smiling photos, something else had been building. Tension, old arguments, a relationship stretched thin by time, mistrust, and unspoken resentments. By nightfall, everything would change. Mickese James Bostic, 27 years old, a father of 5 and well-respected juvenile detention officer, was lying motionless in the driveway, crushed between a Dodge Charger and the brick wall of his home. The party had ended, not with music, not with cake, but with a 911 call and screams that pierced the neighborhood. His partner, 30-year-old Shatice Jackson, stood nearby, silent, expressionless, as first responders rushed in. She didn't try to run, she didn't speak. Not at first. The guests were gone. The kids were still there. And what had just happened didn't make any sense. Was this a tragic accident? A moment of rage? Or something far more tangled than anyone was ready to admit? Have you ever witnessed a family celebration take a tragic turn? Share your experiences in the comments below, because this one will stay with you. And here's where the story takes its sharpest turn. Not just because of what happened that night, but because of what came just before it. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from viewers around the world. Before the headlines, before the sirens, before the driveway became a crime scene, there were just 2 people. Mickese James Bostic and Shatice Jackson, a couple with history, children, and the kind of complex bond that can only form over years of shared life. Mickese Bostic, just 27 years old, had spent nearly a decade of his life working inside the walls of the Jefferson County Juvenile Detention Center. He was young, but he wasn't new to responsibility. By the time most people his age were still finding their footing, Mickese was already deep into a career focused on guiding troubled youth, kids who had been caught in cycles of violence, neglect, and crime. He wasn't just doing a job, he was trying to make a difference. He showed up day after day. And when he clocked out, he went home, not to rest, but to his other full-time role, father. To his family, Mickese wasn't defined by his badge or title. He was a provider, the kind of man who worked extra shifts to make birthdays special, who remembered doctor's appointments and school events. His aunt, Brenda Frazier, put it plainly. He was going to provide for his family, and he was going to do the things he needed to do for his family. That was Mickese, steady, involved, present. In a world where many fall short, he stood firm. He had 5 children, 3 with Shatice Jackson, the woman he'd spent years building a life with. Their relationship wasn't perfect, few are, but it had roots, it had depth. And from the outside, it looked like the 2 of them were doing their best to navigate the chaos of parenting, work, and daily life. Shatice, 30 years old, was a mother first, 5 children under her care, a reality that rarely leaves room for rest. There isn't much publicly known about her professional life or education, but what's clear is that her world revolved around her family. And it was in that domestic sphere, among diapers, meals, birthdays, and arguments, where their story played out. She and Mickese shared not just a home, but responsibility for raising their 3 young children. They coexisted within the unpredictable rhythm of a household with multiple kids. The late nights, the early mornings, the stress, the small joys. To the outside world, it may have looked like a struggling couple trying to make it work. But those closest to them knew that tension was never far from the surface. There had been disagreements, arguments that grew louder over the years. No public records confirm any prior legal trouble between them, but family members hinted at a relationship that wasn't always peaceful. Long-term relationships can be complicated, especially when shaped by economic pressure, exhaustion, and personal differences. And yet, despite the strain, they remain tethered by their children, their shared history, and perhaps even hope. Their Easter gathering in 2025 was supposed to be a moment of reprieve, a dual celebration, the resurrection holiday and their daughter's 7th birthday. The children were dressed up, the decorations were set, family came and went. It was a rare pause in the routine, a time to breathe, smile, be present. But something was off that day. According to early reports, an argument broke out inside the house. Voices rose, accusations flew. At some point, Shatice retrieved a firearm and allegedly fired it, not at anyone, but inside the home. A signal. A moment that shifted the tone from argument to alarm. The gunshot wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something irreversible. By the time she got behind the wheel, the situation had already reached its breaking point. In a matter of minutes, a life was taken. A man who had spent his days keeping other young lives on the right path, now gone, in front of his own children. And standing at the center of it all was the woman who had once called him family. What happened between those 4 walls that day? What caused a mother of 5 to go from parenting to being taken into custody? These questions hang over the case like heavy fog. And in the next part of this story, we'll walk through the chain of events that took this holiday from celebration to catastrophe. Easter Sunday, March 31st, 2024. A day meant for renewal, faith, and family. On Birmingham's Lisa Lane, the weather was mild, and the mood, at least early in the day, was celebratory. Inside the home of Shatice Jackson and Mickese James Bostic, balloons were being blown up, food was being prepared, and children buzzed with excitement. The holiday had double meaning. Not just Easter, but the 7th birthday of one of the couple's daughters. Family members were invited, friends stopped by, photos were taken, laughter echoed in the house. By most accounts, the day began without incident. The children played while adults moved in and out of the kitchen. Some were helping with food, others checking on kids, while Jackson and Bostic juggled hosting duties with parenting their 3 shared children and 2 others. There was nothing that hinted at the tragedy that would unfold just hours later. The couple, together for years, had known both comfort and conflict. But on this day, even those closest to them could not have predicted the sudden shift that was coming. As afternoon turned into evening, the mood inside the home began to shift. An argument reportedly broke out between Jackson and Bostic. The nature of the dispute has not been publicly detailed, but witnesses later described a domestic altercation that quickly escalated. What began as raised voices turned into something much more dangerous. Words turned into threats. Tension became fear. And at some point during the heated exchange, Jackson retrieved a firearm. She didn't aim it at anyone, according to police. Instead, she fired the weapon inside the home. The bullet wasn't meant to kill, but it shattered whatever peace remained. Guests panicked. Children screamed. The sound of a gunshot turned celebration into chaos. It was no longer a family disagreement. It had become something far more serious. The escalation continued when, during a heated argument, Jackson reportedly grabbed a gun and fired it inside the house. Fortunately, no one was struck by the bullet, but the situation had gone from bad to worse. Jackson, apparently in a fit of rage, then stormed out of the house and into the driveway, where her vehicle was parked. The exact sequence of events remains unclear, but what is known is that Jackson, in an alleged moment of extreme anger, revved the engine of the car and allegedly drove it directly into Bostic, running him over and pinning him between the vehicle and the side of the house. Around 6:38 p.m., authorities received a 911 call from Lisa Lane, reports of a domestic disturbance involving a vehicle. When officers arrived, they found Bostic pinned between a white sedan and the home. The driver was Shatice Jackson. The immediate findings at the scene were stark. Mickese Bostic's body bore clear signs of fatal injuries, and the vehicle that had struck him was still idling in the driveway. Law enforcement quickly secured the area, ensuring that there was no immediate threat, and began the process of collecting evidence. Shatice Jackson was located near the vehicle and was quickly detained. At first, Jackson appeared distraught, but her demeanor raised suspicions as investigators began to piece together the timeline of events. Law enforcement took statements from family members, witnesses who had gathered for the Easter celebration, and neighbors who had been close enough to hear the argument escalating inside the house. Witnesses described a volatile argument between Bostic and Jackson that had been building for hours. Some noted that there had been prior tension between the couple, though many had hoped that the day's celebration would provide a reprieve from the ongoing strain. But as the afternoon wore on, the situation took a darker turn. One witness reported hearing raised voices, followed by a loud bang, a sound that was later confirmed to be the discharge of a firearm inside the house. Bostic's injuries were catastrophic, and he was later pronounced dead at the scene. The shock of his death reverberated through the family and the local community. Despite the presence of several children inside the home, some of them Bostic's own, no one else was physically harmed, though the emotional toll would prove to be deep and long-lasting. Shatice Jackson was arrested at the scene without incident. Law enforcement officers, now certain that a crime had been committed, transported her to the Jefferson County Jail for questioning. The situation was grave, and the charges she faced would soon reflect the severity of her actions. Within hours of her arrest, Jackson was formally charged with capital murder. The gravity of these charges stemmed from the brutal nature of the crime and the fact that children had been present during the incident. According to Alabama law, capital murder includes cases where the act involves the death of a person during the commission of another felony, such as domestic violence, especially when children are witnesses to the crime. The decision to pursue capital murder charges was not taken lightly. Prosecutors would need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Jackson's actions were not only intentional, but also that they fell within the legal framework that warranted such a charge. The fact that children had witnessed the violent altercation and the subsequent killing of their father added a disturbing layer of complexity to the case. In Alabama, capital murder can carry severe consequences, including the possibility of the death penalty. However, the prosecution would also consider the specifics of the case, the emotional state of the accused, her history with Bostic, and the dynamics of their relationship, before determining the most appropriate legal strategy. While some might argue that Jackson's actions were driven by intense emotions, others believed that her decision to be for us. The vehicle, still running, had crashed against the house with enough force to fatally injure Bostic. He was crushed between the car and the brick wall. First responders moved quickly. Bostic was transported to UAB Hospital, still alive, but with injuries too severe to overcome. Within the hour, he was pronounced dead. Inside the home, the scene was one of shock and disbelief. 5 children, including the birthday girl, had witnessed the day's unraveling. What started as a party had ended with blood on the driveway, shattered glass, and an arrest. Police would later confirm that the firearm discharged inside the home had been recovered, and that Jackson had been identified as the person who pulled the trigger. However, it wasn't the gun that killed Bostic, it was the impact of the car, driven by the mother of his children, that ended his life. The community was stunned. Neighbors described Bostic as friendly, always waving when driving by. Others recalled seeing the kids playing outside just days before. The idea that this man, a juvenile detention officer who spent nearly 9 years working with at-risk youth, could lose his life in such a violent, intimate way left many struggling to process. For his family, the pain was beyond words. His aunt, Brenda Frazier, shared her heartbreak with local media. "He didn't deserve to go out like this," she said. "He was a young man trying to do right, not just for his kids, but for other people's kids too." Frazier had been like a second mother to Bostic, raising him after his mother passed away. She had hoped he would live long enough to see his children grow up, to walk his daughters down the aisle, to retire from public service with pride. Instead, she had to identify his body. And for the children, 5 in total, the trauma may last a lifetime. They didn't just lose a father, they witnessed violence that no child should ever see. A birthday forever linked with grief. Easter, now synonymous with tragedy. As authorities pieced together the timeline, questions remained. What exactly triggered the escalation? Had there been warning signs? Were there prior instances of violence that never reached law enforcement? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, could this have been prevented? The case against Shatice Jackson is now working its way through the court system. Her bond was initially denied, and she remains in custody. Legal experts say the use of a vehicle as a weapon during a domestic dispute could qualify her case for capital punishment, though it's unclear if prosecutors will pursue the death penalty. What is clear is that a family has been torn apart. One man is dead, one woman sits in a cell, and 5 children are left to grow up carrying the weight of that night, the night their birthday party turned into a crime scene. After the tragic events of Easter Sunday unfolded on Lisa Lane in Birmingham, Alabama, the local authorities were thrust into an intense investigation. The nature of the incident left the community reeling, and the immediate response from law enforcement would set the stage for a complex legal process. The death of Mickese James Bostic did more than devastate one family. It sent waves of sorrow through an entire community. In the days following the tragedy, Bostic's family struggled to process the loss of a man they not only loved but deeply admired. His aunt, Brenda Frazier, spoke publicly, her voice still trembling with disbelief.
She would do him so cruelly. It's so wrong. It's not fair. It's not right, but he's a good person. He's truly gonna be missed. You know, a long time ago they said there's a few good men left. He was one of them. He was gonna provide for his family, and he's gonna do the things that he needed to do for his family.
He was a good man, she said, holding back tears. He loved his children, and he loved his job. He worked hard to make a better life for them. Rosemary Adekbo, another aunt, echoed the sentiment. Mickese was the one we all knew we could count on. If something needed fixing, if someone needed help, he showed up. He was always present. And now, he's just gone. It doesn't feel real. Family members describe Bostic as more than just a juvenile detention officer. He was a proud father who prioritized his children above all else. Those closest to him say he never missed birthdays, holidays, or milestones. That he died on a day meant to celebrate his daughter's life has only deepened the heartbreak. Among the 5 children affected by the tragedy, 3 were his biological children with Shatice Jackson. Witnessing the violent end to their father's life during a celebration meant to bring joy has left a deep emotional scar. Family members and child welfare professionals have expressed concern about the lasting trauma this event may inflict on the children. As one family friend stated quietly, there's no way to undo what they saw. At the juvenile detention center where Bostic worked for nearly 9 years, grief was palpable. His colleagues remember him as someone who brought stability to an often unpredictable environment. He was the kind of officer who connected with the kids, one coworker said. He was patient, firm, but fair. He made an impact, and we saw it every day. Some of these kids don't have positive role models, and he tried to be that for them. In honor of Bostic, a small vigil was organized by coworkers and community members just days after his death. Candles were lit outside the Jefferson County Youth Detention Center, and a photo of Bostic in uniform was placed near a display of flowers and handwritten notes. One note read, "You made a difference. Rest easy." The event was quiet but powerful, a space for those who knew him to grieve together. In neighborhoods across Birmingham, residents expressed shock that something so violent could happen during what was supposed to be a family gathering. Social media posts reflected a mix of outrage, sorrow, and disbelief. Many called attention to the dangers of domestic conflict and the need for more support systems for families experiencing tension and instability. Bostic's relatives say they are now focused on taking care of his children, who remain their top priority. Legal arrangements and custody decisions will follow in time, but for now, the focus is on helping them feel safe and loved after witnessing such unimaginable violence. Community leaders have also spoken up, urging families to seek help when facing volatile domestic situations. The tragedy has reignited conversations around domestic violence, trauma, and how quickly things can escalate when emotions are left unchecked. Still, for the Bostic family, no amount of dialogue or policy change can bring him back. His absence is permanent. His legacy, however, is carried in the memories of those who knew him, not only as a dedicated officer, but as a son, nephew, friend, and above all, a father. The tragic death of Mickese Bostic stands as a painful reminder of the silent buildup that can exist behind closed doors, where unresolved tension, emotional volatility, and strained relationships simmer until a line is crossed that can never be uncrossed. Mickese James Bostic wasn't just a name in a news headline. He was a father, a brother, a son, and a protector of youth who'd lost their way. His nearly 9-year career at the Jefferson County Youth Detention Center spoke volumes about his character. He worked daily to guide young people back toward the right path, offering discipline with compassion and consistency. To his family, he was a provider who gave everything he had to make life better for his children. To his colleagues, he was respected, and to his community, he was present. The shock of his death on Easter Sunday didn't only stem from the violence, it was the loss of someone so rooted in doing good. His children, especially the 3 he shared with Shatice Jackson, have been left with a void that words can't fill. His family, especially aunts like Brenda Fraser and Rosemary Adekpo, described him not as perfect, but as someone who genuinely tried to love, tried to work, tried to do right. They remember a man who made time for birthdays, who took pride in his role as a father, and who always kept his children close. That's what makes this ending so painful. A life like Bostic's, marked by dedication to others, shouldn't have ended pinned between a home and a vehicle in front of loved ones and children. It wasn't just violent, it was deeply traumatic, scarring not only the witnesses, but the broader community. Domestic violence doesn't always arrive with bruises or broken windows. Sometimes it comes in the form of a raised voice at a birthday party, a disagreement that escalates when no one steps away, or a lifetime of tension compressed into a single explosive moment. In this case, the result was fatal. The question that now echoes through the Birmingham community and beyond is, could it have been prevented? Understanding the warning signs of an unhealthy domestic environment is crucial. These signs may include repeated arguments that escalate quickly, threats of harm, displays of extreme control or jealousy, emotional intimidation, and the presence of weapons in heated disputes. While the full history between Bostic and Jackson may never be publicly known, the final event makes clear that something had reached a breaking point. For individuals in similar situations, resources do exist, even though reaching out can feel daunting. National and local organizations provide support through hotlines, emergency shelters, counseling, and legal guidance. In Alabama, the Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-650-6522, is available 24/7. Other networks such as Safe House of Shelby County and the YWCA Central Alabama also offer direct aid to individuals and families in distress. The key is recognizing the moment to seek help before the violence escalates. But this is not only a private issue, it's a community issue. There is a shared responsibility among friends, neighbors, coworkers, and extended family to pay attention and intervene when signs of danger appear. Too often, warning signs are brushed off as just a couple arguing or a private matter. But when someone expresses fear, when children begin to withdraw or show signs of emotional distress, or when arguments become routine and intense, it's time to act. Intervention doesn't have to mean confrontation. Sometimes it means simply checking in, offering support, or quietly connecting someone to the resources they need. In Bostic's case, it's unclear whether the people closest to the couple were aware of any history of conflict. But his death has triggered broader discussions about how communities handle domestic disputes. Leaders across Jefferson County have urged residents not to wait until it's too late to speak up. Beyond the tragedy itself, there is the matter of those left behind, particularly the children. The emotional aftermath for them is likely to last a lifetime. Counselors and child trauma experts emphasize the importance of long-term mental health support, stability, and safe environments for healing. These children lost their father and, in many ways, their mother, all in one night. The weight of that loss is not theirs to carry alone. As this story continues to unfold in the courts, its emotional and moral lessons are already resonating. Domestic violence is not a problem confined to a particular neighborhood, background, or relationship type. It can exist anywhere, and anyone can be vulnerable to its effects. That's why it's so important to normalize conversations around it, build support systems that are easily accessible, and ensure that victims know they're not alone. There is no way to rewrite what happened on Lisa Lane that Easter Sunday. But as communities reflect, as families mourn, and as conversations continue, perhaps some good can emerge. a willingness to speak up sooner, to listen more closely, and to act before tragedy strikes. But tragedy often demands something more than sorrow. It demands change. If Bostic's story reveals anything, it's that even seemingly stable households can harbor unresolved conflict. That violence can erupt during moments meant for celebration. That love, when paired with stress, miscommunication, or unchecked resentment, can become volatile. And when warning signs are missed, ignored, or dismissed, the results can be irreversible. Domestic violence doesn't always play out in the shadows. Sometimes it builds over time, in arguments, in frustration, in stress that turns hostile. That's why proactive attention matters. Addressing issues early, creating safe outlets for both partners, and involving trusted support systems could mean the difference between reconciliation and ruin. His story should be more than a tragedy. It should be a call to notice, to listen, and to act. Domestic disputes don't always make headlines, but each one carries weight. And if nothing else, this story should spark greater urgency for resources, support, and awareness.